The Aba Women's Riot of 1929 is one of the most important events in Nigerian history. But if we're being honest, most people only know it as a short paragraph in a textbook, usually described simply as a riot. And that's a problem, because when you actually look closely at what happened, you realize this wasn't a random violence at all. It was a well-organized protest led by Nigerian women against colonial policies, especially the fear of taxation without representation. What's even more interesting is that the issues these women raised almost 100 years ago are still very relevant today, especially when you look at how Nigerians relate to tax and government authority. Before colonial rule, women in southeastern Nigeria played very strong economic and social roles. They were traders, farmers, and organizers of markets. Through this work, they supported their families and entire communities. Women also had recognized ways of influencing leadership. They could organize collectively and protest decisions they believed were unjust. These process methods allowed women to challenge authority and be heard. But when British colonial rule was introduced, these systems were slowly pushed aside. Governance became centered on warrant chiefs and native court, structures that excluded women almost completely. At the time, men were taxed, but women were not, and everyone in the society understood this clearly. Things began to change in 1929. Colonial officials started carrying out census exercises in parts of southeastern Nigeria, especially around Aba. To the British administration, this was just a routine process, but to the local people, it meant something very different. From past experience, communities know that census exercises were usually followed by taxation. So when women were asked questions about their households, rumors spread quickly that the colonial government was planning to tax women as well. This created fear and anger, not because women refused to contribute, but because this decision was being made without consultation and without any clear benefit to their communities. Women across different towns and villages began to organize. There was no central leadership. There were no phones, no social media, no formal meetings. Information spread through markets, family connections, and community networks. Thousands of women came together to express their opposition. They protested peacefully using songs, dances, and large public gatherings. They confronted warrant chiefs and demanded explanations from colonial authorities. Their message was simple and clear. Women should not be taxed without consent or representation. The colonial government saw these protests as a threat. Instead of listening to the women's concerns, British officials responded with force. Troops were sent in, and in several locations, soldiers opened fire on unarmed protesters. Many women were killed, many others were injured. The violence shocked local communities and exposed the harsh reality of colonial rule. What started as a protest against taxation had now become a wider struggle over dignity, voice, and justice. After the uprising, the colonial government was forced to make changes. Plans to tax women were dropped. Some warrant chiefs were removed from office. Parts of the native court system were reviewed. However, these reforms did not lead to lasting political inclusion for women. Instead, the event was quickly downplayed in official records and described as a disturbance rather than a legitimate protest. Because of this, many of the women who led the movement were gradually erased from national memory. The Aba Women's Riot matters not just because of what happened in 1929, but because of what it reveals about Nigeria's relationship with taxation. The women were not rejecting government itself. They were rejecting a system that demanded payment without accountability. Under colonial rule, taxation felt like extraction, not partnership. And that perception did not disappear with independence. Even today, many Nigerians still question how tax money is used and whether it truly benefits ordinary people. Understanding the Aba Women's Riot helps explain why tax compliance in Nigeria is often weak. The issue isn't just enforcement or awareness, it is trust. When people don't see transparency, fairness, or visible public benefit, they are less likely to feel any obligation to contribute. And this distrust has deep historical roots shaped by experiences like those of 1929. The Aba Women's Riot was a turning point in Nigerian history. It showed the power of collective action and the dangers of imposing policies without representation. Nearly a century later, the questions those women raised are still unanswered. And until taxation in Nigeria is clearly linked to accountability and public benefit, the legacy of 1929 will continue to shape how Nigerians respond to government demands.